Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a card making tutorial for you where I'll be using the Altenew Fabulous Floret stamp set. It's a really pretty large floral stamp set, and along with it I'll be using the matching mask stencils with it. And I'm actually just using the masking part of it. And what's really nice about some of Altenew's stamps is that they've included, or they have, you can buy it separately, a stencil and mask set that go along with the flowers. So if you want to do some masking, you don't have to cut out your own mask. The little plastic cutouts come with it. So I'll show you in my video how I use the mask to make a really pretty layered look. And I'm making this card here where I do some heat embossing and then I do the masking with the flowers. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm starting off with the Fabulous Floret stamp set from Altenew, and I'm using this open outline flower, and I'm just going to stamp it 3 times across this white cardstock panel that I have using my MISTI, and I'm using some Memento black ink to stamp it because I'm going to use some Copic markers on the flowers. So in between stamping, I just wipe the stamp off, and then I'm going to put the mask from the stencil set over the top of my flower. And it's just kind of made of the same material as a stencil is. It's kind of a hard, flexible plastic. And I'm just going to line it up over the flower, and then I'm going to line up the same flower stamp overlapping that first flower. And then I'm going to put my MISTI down, pick up the stamp, and then I'm going to stamp with the Memento ink again on top of the flower. And then you see that the mask kind of came off, and you can see how you get that nice look of the flower being behind the other flower. And this is one of my favorite techniques to use, is masking. And before I got this mask set, I usually would just cut out some masks from some masking paper and place it over the top of a flower or whatever it was that I was trying to mask. And that's, I mean, it takes a little bit more time. It's not that bad, but it's really nice to have this option. And it's nice too that the set comes not only with the masks, but also with the stencils. So you have a lot of different options for doing backgrounds and that kind of thing. Okay, so I stamped my third flower, and that is all finished. And I made a little bit of a smear with the ink, and I like to just take a white Uniball pen and kind of go over the little smear mark with the pen, and that's a great way to fix a mistake when you get some black ink in a place that you don't want to get it. So it works pretty well, but you're not going to be able to see it because it's going to be blocked by the sentiment anyway. So next I'm going to go ahead and start coloring with some Copics, and I have a variety of pinks and a couple of yellows too that I'm going to add to the inside of the flower. And then I'm just going to cut out the entire row of flowers using my scissors. And I like these cutter bee scissors. They're small enough that they fit in the little corners of the flower, but they're not too big that they're too bulky. And I'm just leaving a little white part around, like a white border around the edge of the flowers, because I think this will look nice on top of the blue cardstock that I'm going to be using for my card base. So I'm just kind of cleaning off the edges a little bit. And that's all finished. So I'm going to clear everything away, and I will heat emboss my card base. So I'm just using a piece of blue cardstock, and I'm just going to score down the middle. It's just 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'll be using my Make Art Station with the magnets on it to secure down the card panel so I can stamp on top of the front of it. And I'm just going to take some Post-it tape and cover the back of the card right at the seam of the fold so that no stamping gets on the back of the card. And I'm using the same flower that I used with the row of flowers that I just got done coloring to create a heat embossed background. And I'm going to be using some Versamark Dazzle ink to stamp on the back. And I like this ink. It has a little bit of a shimmer to it, but it's kind of a frosty color, and it's not going to show through or anything, but I feel like you can see it better when you're stamping on dark cardstock. And I'm just going to stamp about 6 of the flowers kind of off the edge of the card, and then just sort of at different angles on the front of the card to make it more interesting. I'm going to try not to overlap too much, but if that happens, it's not a big deal because the main row of flowers is going to be covering it anyway. And I'm going to do about 6 flowers. That's about as many that fit. And I like this look of having a layer of the white heat embossed flowers underneath I'm going to pop up the main row of flowers on top of that. And it gives you kind of a clean and layered look to your card, but it's not too bulky and not too many layers. So I like to do this technique a lot. I also like to do stenciling too. That would also look good in place of the heat embossing. So I'm just going to add some white filigree embossing powder to heat up. And this is a nice, very fine embossing powder, since this is a pretty delicate looking background. So this works really well, and heat embosses really well too. And I'll just brush off any of the excess powder, and then I'll heat emboss it really quick, and then it'll be ready for putting together the card. So I'm just going to stamp a sentiment, and I'm going to be using Avery L's Banner Bits stamp set for this, and I'm just choosing a happy birthday sentiment to make it a birthday card. But there's all types of sentiments on the stamp set, which is nice. And I like that they're a little bit bigger, but you can still make a sentiment strip out of them. And I'm just using some black dye ink to stamp it, and I'm just going to trim it down to a little rectangle. And then I'm ready to assemble everything. So I'm going to take some foam tape and add it to the back of my row of flowers. And when I originally stamped the flowers, I stamped the first flower off the edge of the paper a little bit, so when I cut it out, it was flat on that side. And this is helpful for when you're putting it on the front of the card, because you can just line it up really nicely to that left side of the card. So I'm just going to kind of get that even. And I really like the way the pink pops against the blue. And then I'll just add my sentiment strip. And Since I'm adding it on top of the popped up flowers, I'm just going to add a little bit of foam tape to the right end side of the sentiment to kind of keep it level with the flowers. And then I'll just put some tape runner on the other part of the strip, since that's going to be laying flat on the flowers. And then I'll just lay that right on top there, right to the edge of the card. And the card is finished. The one thing I want to do, though, is add a little liner to the inside of the card. When I use colored cardstock for my note cards, I always add a little bit of white cardstock to the inside in case somebody wants to write a greeting on the inside. So I just cut it down, cut the cardstock down to a rectangle, and just use some tape runner and add that to the inside of the card. So now the card is finished. And I like that clean and layered look. And the masking just makes it so much fun and easier to do that row of flowers. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in my next video.